Beyond Meat, the mission is super simple. It's to build meat from plants.
What do you say to people who say you're an animal rights activist working within capitalism?
That's a good question.
Thank you so much
Sure.
for doing the interview.
Sure.
I really appreciate it. Can you tell me about the new relationship with Tyson Foods?
Sure. You get right to the point. So it was an investment only at this point, and it's something that was the outcome of about 4 years of discussion along the way. So we initially were working with Hillshire Brands, which is a company they acquired. And, you know, from the beginning and to today, the idea has been that, you know, we want to be part of the mainstream discussion in terms of protein at the center of the plate. And we don't want to be a niche product. We want to get outside of the meat alternative case where, you know, almost no mainstream consumer shops, and into the meat section where, you know, the majority of people go for their protein. And in fact, to change the meat section from being about meat to being about protein. And so, you know, you've seen a set of deliberate steps on behalf of the company to get out of that niche and into the mainstream, get into the meat case, partner with a company like Tyson. All of those things are part of the same goal.
How do you get into a meat part of the store? Like legally, like
Right.
logistically, has that been a
Right.
barrier?
You know, it's really interesting. So we tried to do that first in 2011 and 2012, and we just weren't ready. Our products weren't ready, and I don't think that the grocery store was ready either. And you know, so we kind of retrenched and went back and began much more aggressive development around the basic idea of the company. And that the idea of the company is really that you can create a piece of meat directly from plants. Like that's the core of who we are as a company. If you look at the composition of meat, that the answer becomes pretty clear. You know, it's basically at a very high level. It's fat, it's protein, and it's water. Maybe a little more amino acids, lipids, very small amount of carbohydrates, almost non-existent. You know, trace minerals, and then water. And all of those things can be sourced outside the animal, and they can be placed in the same architecture that they are in animal muscle or meat. Those things are knowable. You know, you can look at them in textbook in animal agriculture. You can put a chicken breast in an MRI and begin to understand its structure. And so I think the days where you have to use an animal to create a piece of meat are rapidly diminishing. And so, you know, we started with that premise. Didn't have the products we needed to be able to get through into the meat case. And I think finally with this burger, we've gotten close enough to an animal protein equivalent that we sort of gained entry into that meat case. And so, you know, our task now is to continue to make that better so that we can expand our offering.
What criteria were you given before you were able to do that?
Right. It was more, it was less organized than that in the sense that you just kind of know when you know, like when so we initially had, to give an example, one of the early meetings we had with meat buyers was here in Southern California, where we were a major supermarket chain, about 10 people in a room like this, all of them meat buyers from different stores, and we gave them this current burger, and they loved it. I mean, it was like a home run, right? And they were like, oh, this is better than a lot of grass-fed beef that we serve. And so we left the meeting like high-fiving, oh, it's going to work, fantastic. But a week later, we get a call saying, you know what, the regional vice president said this has to go in the meat alternative section because the meat alternative is not meat. And so we said, we're not going to sell it to you then. And so we have resisted selling to anybody that's not going to put it in the meat case. Someone in the Rocky Mountain region of the United States, Colorado, Utah, et cetera, said, you know, we're gonna put this in the meat case. And so Tom Rich is the guy's name, and he made that very bold decision. So put us in the meat case, and the results have been ridiculous. It's been amazing to see the consumer uptake.
Financially, have you had to compromise anything for being kind of a little bit stubborn like that, or are you playing the long game?
Long game, for sure. You just don't, I mean, to win in the meat alternative case is to win a narrow victory. You know,
Sure.
You really want to be patient enough to get into the meat case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How important is it for plant-based companies to work with the meat industry instead of against them?
Right. That's a really good question. I think you may have heard me say, meat is really something that's part of who we are. Like we evolved consuming meat. We evolved because of the consumption of meat. It changed our bodies and led to the size of our brains and our physiology, etc. So to be against meat, I think is an awkward position. A really productive position is to be for a different type of meat, a plant-based meat. And I think that you can rally people around, but to try to build a mainstream brand telling people to not eat what they love, doesn't sound like a good idea to me. So let's celebrate what's great about meat, but let's, like everything else we've done, like this phone right here. This is a phone. You're not going to tell me it's a fake phone. It just doesn't. It's not a landline, right? And so, can we move off of this distinction that meat has to come from an animal and get more about the functionality of meat, the composition of meat? And if we can do that, we can solve this problem.
Beyond the company's financial gains and ambitions, what are the big benefits of the company?
Right, so the four of them are articulated behind you, which you can't see on camera, but I'll walk through them. And we call these the four horsemen. And for the consumer, it really begins with human health. We believe that these products are healthier for you, and whether you look at diabetes, heart disease, cancer, et cetera, all the things you've probably been focusing on in the last week and a half and beyond, of course. We can make a really valuable contribution in that regard. And then you go to climate, and I have a very strong belief in the work that Robert Goodland has done in this, and his partner Jeff Nang, around the role of livestock in climate change. And they didn't have a dog in the fight, so to speak. They were with the World Bank at the time, so not a left-leaning organization by any means. They did an exhaustive study that said, look, it's about 51% greenhouse gas emissions contributed to livestock. Maybe that number's too high, but it's certainly not 4%. It's certainly not just 10%. And one of the things that was fascinating to me about that work was they counted the fact that all livestock is breathing, and when they breathe, they're respiring carbon. And the UN doesn't count that. They say, well, that's part of the carbon cycle. But their point is there's an unnatural number of animals on the Earth's surface. They're all breathing. Carbon cycle is broken because we're taking down so much of the sink. And then so you go from climate change to natural resources, and you look at here in California, there's a water shortage. I went down to a restaurant a couple of years ago down the street from my house, and on the menu it said we're no longer offering water unless you ask for it because of the water shortage. But then you look at the menu, it's like all steak. I was like, okay, let's focus on the issues, right? And then lastly is animal welfare. And it really depends on where you come out on that question. But I think more and more people are beginning to see the world the way that a guy that is from your home country, Darwin, laid it out. And this was back in, he published The Origin of Species in the 1850s or so. He was right that there's this grand that we share life, right, with all the other forms on Earth, right, and that we're not distinct from them, and that we have similar, central nervous systems, etc. And so more and more people are coming around to that, but that's a personal issue. That's a personal preference.
When you say that's a personal preference, do you mean you don't take that argument into meetings with investors?
Or even with customers. It really, it's almost religion. It's you just can't. That's something that I think is really up for someone else to work through on their own, and not for a company like mine to have at the forefront. So
do you actively try and separate yourself from communities like the vegan community?
Not at all. No. But I just think everyone has their role.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, I think.
So you talked about the benefits just then. Is that what motivated you to start Beyond Meat?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
and that was in
2009.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how many series of funding have you had?
So we've had quite a bit, which is very fortunate. We started just with friends of my own investment, and then friends and family, and then I think something very important happened to the company in 2010. A group named Kleiner Perkins reached out. They're a venture fund in Silicon Valley, and they were way ahead of all of their colleagues in the Valley, thinking about food as a way to solve problems and to invest in. And so a guy named Ray Lane and Amol Deshpande, two partners there, really stuck their neck out and said, this is an idea that's worth pursuing. And it was controversial at the time, but they got behind the company, and Ray is still on the board today and an enormously important person within the company, and took the chance. Now, of course, there's a lot more stuff going on in the Valley today, but back when they made that investment, it was pretty controversial, and they've stuck with us, and it made all the difference.
Have you had any high-profile people invest in your company, and do you think that's helped?
Yeah, we've been very fortunate on that front. I mean, enormously fortunate. Whether it's folks I just mentioned, Kleiner, to Bill Gates, to the founder of Twitter, Biz Stone and Evan Williams. All along the way, you see really interesting, constructive people getting involved. Seth Goldman, who's the founder of Honest Tea. Just the number of really important funds and people have gotten behind what we're doing, and I think that's indicative of importance, right? I don't think it's anything particular about what we do. It's the idea, right, that you no longer need to use an animal to create a piece of meat. How do you think about eliminating that bottleneck, like you've thought about that hundreds of times, thousands of times in other industries?
When you first started the company, were you thinking about getting those kind of people involved? Was it a strategic thing for you to get those people involved, and how did you do that?
That's a good question. I was thinking more about the outcome that I was seeking when I started the company. I did have a plan to approach venture funds, but I think like a lot of entrepreneurs, I was sort of just myopically focused on growing the business, and I think very much so that if you dedicate yourself to something that is a calling, and it's the right calling, and it's something that benefits something broader than yourself, that amazing things will happen. That's been my experience anyway. And I think these people getting involved reflect the power of the idea, basically.
So you focused on the business, and you're saying the rest is kind of taking care of itself.
I think so. If you do a good job and sort of stay true to your mission and think strategically and try to reward the investors, etc., I think really good people will come to support you.
The former Irish president, Mary Robinson, recently told the world it needs to move to a vegan diet in a recent speech. What kind of political support have Beyond Meat got? If any?
That's a good question. I would say almost none.
None?
Yeah. I mean, I think the government is in a tricky place on this one. Like anything, I mean, they have a lot of invested a lot of vested interests that are not aligned with what we're trying to do. So I wouldn't say the government's a strong source of support for us.
Do you see that as a barrier?
I think they should to my view on government is that they should level the playing field in this regard. It's not my political view more generally, but in this regard, level the playing field.
In terms of subsidies, you mean?
Everything, yeah. Just get rid of the things that are distorting the market and allow us to compete. I mean, that's the biggest thing that they could do. We don't need a handout. We don't need special treatment. But to just create a level playing field where we can compete is the right thing to do.
When you look at the subsidies, I don't have the numbers on the top of my head, but they're massive. A lot of money goes to subsidise the meat and dairy industry. Has that given you a massive headache in terms of trying to get your new products cheap enough to compete with those subsidised products? It's
a great question. It does make it harder. It does make it harder. And there's both the direct subsidies and then there's the externalities that just aren't accounted for. All kinds of things. And so that does make it more difficult to compete. But I think that the consumer interest in this is stronger than that. Like the consumer interest will battle through that, and we just have to stay really attuned to what the consumer wants. And it'd be better if those subsidies weren't there, but it's not what keeps me up at night.
When you say the consumer interest will drive your company, are you implying that you think consumer interests will change in the future as more people become aware of?
It's amazing to me. I mean, I think it's far broader than anything we're doing. But we can't fill orders today. We have too much demand, and that was not the case 5 years ago. it was much more of an uphill battle. Part of it is brand recognition, but part of it is the consumer is changing and changing very quickly. Like, there's just so much more. I mean, how could they not? Like, there's so much more information out there. Like, I mean, you're in this field. Every 6 months, a new study comes out, says something positive about a plant-based diet, or something comes out about climate and everything else. It's this perfect storm that's emerging around this idea, and I think we thankfully are in a place where we can benefit from it.
Do you think there'll be a price decrease as the population takes up plant-based meat alternatives?
Absolutely. So the fact that we're selling today in the meat case at a price that's roughly competitive with, like, let's say, organic grass-fed beef. If you did a heat map, for example, of our facilities and those of, like, Purdue, for example, or Cargill or something, we wouldn't even show up. Like, we'd be like an outhouse. And like, imagine as we start to get scale, what we can do. And it's like, if you just think back to like a basic economics textbook, there's enormous inefficiency in the production model with animal agriculture. We don't have that inefficiency. We have gotten, if you think about that value chain, there's something that is using a tremendous amount of resources to produce the same output that we can produce with far less. We should be cheaper.
Mm-hmm. When you go to investors and meetings in that realm, what's the main marker of your success? Do you talk about how many products you've sold, or do you talk about how well your products mimic real meat?
So I think I'm the first to say that our products aren't there yet. I mean, I think they're good. I think that the one that we have released today, this Beyond Burger, is the best thing we've ever done. I think the earlier products reflect the best that we could do at the time. But we have to be relentless in our pursuit of the structure of meat, the mouthfeel, the sensory experience of meat, and we'll get there for sure. I mean, and I joke with the scientists here that it's a lifetime employment project for them. Like, we've been consuming meat, as humans and as our predecessors for about 2 million years. We're not going to get it right in 7 years. Like, it's going to take longer, but every year our commitment to the consumer is to put out the best thing that we can do, and we do get better every year. And so I think with investors, it's really around helping them to understand the way that we fit into the trend and the way that we can help enable the trend by providing better products.
I was going to get onto the Beyond Burger. Sure. You mentioned it.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that.
Sure. I love this burger. I'm really excited about it. I'm just very proud of the people that did it. There's a group of scientists here that we have a center here called the Manhattan Beach Project, which is because it's near Manhattan Beach, but also we named it that because we wanted to instill within them the understanding that what they're doing has global significance. We wanted to instill within them the understanding that we felt that and feel that they are the brightest scientists that can be working on this problem. And they're from the best schools, they're from all over the world, and that there's a global and urgent nature to what they're doing. And this Beyond Burger, I think, is the first product that really is the outgrowth of that center. And I think what excites me about it, one is the response has been great, which is really, really nice. We've sold out. I was just talking to our sales guy. We're rivaling organic grass-fed beef right now in terms of movement in certain stores.
What do you mean by that in terms of movement?
Just numbers, like units per week, things like that. Like, so in the stores where we're selling, so the whole idea was to get into the meat case where the consumer can make the right choice. Do I want plant-based meat or an animal-based meat? And we're seeing that that consumers are buying this at a rate that is equal to or exceeding grass-fed beef in certain locations. We launched I can't give the numbers, but we just launched in the Center City, Philadelphia. The numbers were astronomical, which was really exciting. And so I think, but what excites me more about the product is really, you can begin to see like a window to the future with it. You can sort of see like, okay, this part's not perfect, but we understand how to make it better, right? And so let's say the distribution of fat isn't exactly how it needs to be, but they're coming up with ways to get it to the point where it will be almost exactly like it's distributed in animal muscle. So that, to me, is really exciting.
Yeah, you've always been really confident about that. What gives you that confidence? Obviously, it helps your marketing by being confident and saying we are going to get there. Right. But do you honestly think you will? And how do you know that?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's an absolute foundational belief. Like it's because there's no. I mean, so we're not going to make a plant-based cholesterol, right? And that's not really even possible. But all of the things that really contribute to the sensory experience of meat, we can drive from plants. And so I guess I have the confidence because I've just seen it, and we can't do everything at scale that we can do in our lab. But I think the way to think about it is that we've seen no material obstacle to doing it.
Eric Schmidt recently came out and ranked plant-based meat as the most important trend in tech, beating things like 3D printing, self-driving cars, and virtual reality.
Right.
He said it's the most important trend in tech. As somebody who works in this industry,
What's the second one?
Do you get that sense?
The second one was self-driving.
Yeah, so there are things like virtual reality, self-driving cars, artificial intelligence.
Right, okay, got it. Okay.
Do you get the sense of the importance of this industry, this industry, having worked in it?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I think he's right on the, I don't know about the other stuff, but on the plant-based side, I can't think of anything. And one of the things that motivates me so much about the company, and I think our investors, is literally as a mental exercise when you're flying back to the UK or whatever, think about this, like, what single change can we make that simultaneously attacks all four of those issues: human health, climate, natural resource, animal welfare, than this? Like, what's more important than doing this if you want to attack all four of those things at once? I've never seen anything in my life where you can make such an impact by focusing on one thing like that, to me. So I worked in fuel cells, for example, before. Great technology, will be here someday, really good for climate, right? But imagine being able to do something that's really good for climate and good for human health. Like, that's really exciting.
What's your relationship like with companies such as Impossible Foods?
Pat's a really good guy, and someone I respect a lot, and I know him personally. We've had lunch and things like that, and been on panels together, and a panel together, and talk on the phone. We have in the past. It's a $200 billion industry here in the United States. So there's plenty of room, and I think that the more people out there doing this, probably the better. I mean, sure, we're competitive. How could you not be? But I think we're both pulling for each other, and we're taking different approaches too. So it'll be very interesting to see how the market reacts.
What's your relationship like with companies like Hampton Creek? Do you know Josh Tetrick?
Yeah, I do know him. And I know Josh Bulk a lot better, and think very highly of Josh Bulk. I don't know Tetrick well.
Do you feel like there's any way you guys can further all of your companies if you work together?
There's just so much going on here. That there's been efforts to try to build a coalition within the plant-based community, and I think it's a good one. We're just so focused on what we got going on here. It's just like not enough time in the day yet. But ultimately, yeah, would it be good to have like the Got Milk campaign, for example, came out of the Milk Board. Would it be good to have something like that? Yeah, absolutely. But I think there's a time for that.
Let's talk about lab-grown meats. Do you think these are like pie-in-the-sky distraction?
No. I had recently the opportunity to spend some time with the gentleman who runs Memphis Meat, who I think highly of. I don't think it's distraction at all. I looked at that technology a lot in the mid-2000s and before I started this company. And I'd come from, as I mentioned, from clean tech for energy, and I was hesitant about getting involved in something else where I couldn't see a clear path to commercialization. I think they will commercialize it, but I didn't. I've often said, like, technology is like no regard for your career. It's going to be ready when it's ready, and I didn't want to get involved in something that couldn't contribute in my lifetime to what I was trying to do. And I think they'll figure it out, and I've heard this sort of 5 years out, that type of thing, and I welcome that. I think it'll be interesting.
You say you welcome that. Do you not see it as a threat to your business?
No, not really.
Why not?
I think because the size of the market is so big, and I think that we're going to attack this problem every way we can, I just don't see. I mean, yeah, sure. If it somehow materialized in a way that was negative for us, it would obviously be concerning. But it's a very big market. I think that's pretty far off.
What do you say to people who say you're an animal rights activist working within capitalism?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. I don't know. I have the tremendous blessing and good fortune to be able to work on something that's so important to me, like in my heart and who I am. I don't think of myself in those terms, really. I just think of someone, I mean, I'm not trying to be skirt the question. Like, I just think about someone who's trying to get something done. And people need to eat food, and they need to eat protein. And I think that it would be amazing to be part of a generation that is the first to separate meat from animals. And that's the level at which I think about it. You know, I have a lot of respect for Ingrid and for PETA and for Humane Society, but I also have a lot of respect for people that, you know, have raised dairy cattle and have raised beef cattle. They come at the world in two different ways. I obviously happen to side with the view that animals are more than production units, but you have to be willing to meet people where they are. And particularly in a consumer-facing business, you really have to pay attention to that. And I'd like to innovate our way out of the problem. I'd like to have our cake and eat it too, so to speak. I'd like to create meat from plants and retire this debate, basically. And I think it'd be a pretty amazing thing to do that.
Are there any strategies or techniques that Beyond Meat utilize that you've learned from unethical businesses?
I mean, I could give you a couple, but I feel like I'd be singling out companies. I think so. Here's an area that I think is important. Is you'll be truthful with your consumer. Like, no one wants to be lied to or tricked or don't overemphasize something, or make claims that just can't be substantiated. I mean, I think that those are it's too frequent in our society. Where, like, with my son the other day, just billboards. Just having to explain to him that the billboard it's a marketing tool. Like, it's not literal. Like, you can't actually trust that. And I would like to be the company that is, you can trust what we say.
Can people trust you when you constantly bombard people with the messaging that you need protein, when you've got a whole host of medical doctors saying you get enough protein from fruit, vegetables, legumes, and grains?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that we don't prescribe any level of protein at all. It's more just, if you want to have a piece of meat, we have a piece of meat for you, but it's made from plants. Like, it's up to you guys. If you wanted to eat, just grains and legumes, that's great. Yeah.
What are the biggest challenges in your mission, in your campaign? The main barriers holding you back?
Right. Where I'm impatient is on the product quality. I think we have the best product on the market. I think the Beyond Burger is better than any other burger that's on the market, for sure. But it's not good enough, and I think continuing to make it better. I eat it all the time. Everyone who eats it seems to love it, but we know that it can be better. And so I think the impatience is around, and the barriers around just the rate of progress. And it's not slow. We're progressing incredibly quickly, but given the urgency of the issue, it can be, there's a level of impatience around it.
More generally, the biggest threat to this industry, what do you think? That you kind of talked about the barriers for your company. What do you think the biggest threat is? Animal
meat is so ingrained in who we are that to make that transition is hard. It's not the same as disrupting, a landline and a cell phone or a new form of computing. This is deep within our DNA. But I have enough faith in the fact that consumers are drawn to better, and if we can create better for them in a way that's truly satisfying, they'll come. So there's something that we think about a lot, which is we call it the meat gap, where the consumption of meat is declining, but the rate in meat replacement or plant-based meat, that in terms of replacing that, is not exactly, it's not keeping up at all, actually. So there's a very big gap. If you look at the dairy case, that gap doesn't exist, right? It's you see decline in dairy, and you see the massive rise in plant-based beverages. And so I think that speaks all to the product, the quality of the product. Like, if there were products there that were readily accessible in the same location that people buy meat, animal meat, you would see that meat gap disappear and it'd be filled with plant-based meat.
Lastly, do you have any advice for people who want to start an ethical business?
I think a general piece of advice around, or advice for business, people who are interested in starting businesses. So I went to business school, and and one of the classes I took there was an entrepreneur class, and the guy used to always bring back people who had started businesses and were very successful. You know, they're like generally like pretty good looking, pretty young, and I always just like want to raise my hand and be like, where are all the people you like? They're living with their mom right now, you know, because they like took your advice to go start a business and failed. So I think you have to be willing to fail. You know, like really, like don't have a safety net. Don't be like, well, you know, I'll try this for 6 months and I'll go back, because it's so difficult to do it that you will, if you have a safety net, you'll probably take it. Right. And so for me, I initially had, you know, I won't spend this account, I won't sell this house, you know, I always have it, and I just got rid of all that. Like you had to go through it, you know, and so at some point you have to be successful. You have no other choice. And so to make sure that you care enough about what you're doing, that you're willing to do things that, you know, when you began, you weren't sure you would be willing to do. But you know, it's that process almost of getting your back against the wall is when some of that best thing comes out, when you have to do something. And so positioning yourself to be willing to fail, to believe in it so strongly that you'd surprise yourself even in how persistent you'll be, is really important. So don't pick a wrong business. Don't pick a business that you're sort of lukewarm about. The other piece was that the other thing that in business school that I always found funny was that they would always tell you, like, you make sure there's a competitive moat around what you're doing. Like, don't go into something where other people are there's a lot of other competition. I just don't believe that. Like, I think if you have a strong enough idea and you're willing to be better than anybody else, you can enter the most crowded field possible. And you know, the examples of that are everywhere. So don't be shy. If you have a vision and you have a calling for it, you know, go for it.